AI is one of the most talked about technologies. However, most people increasingly see AI as either a kind of super technology that can perform a limitless range of tasks, or as technology gone rogue with sci-fi images of AI-powered machines taking over the world. Turns out neither really defines AI. In fact, it could be said that AI is one of today's most misunderstood technologies. There's a lot that AI can do, and even more that it will be able to do, but it has its limitations as well. I'm Jane Singer, and thank you for joining me today. It's great to have you as part of our growing international community that now includes industry leaders in over 100 countries. In today's episode, Robb Wilson, founder, lead designer, and chief technologist behind OneReach.ai, joins us on a seat at the table. Amongst its many achievements, OneReach is the highest scoring company in Gartner's first Critical Capabilities for Enterprise Conversational AI Platforms report. Wow, that's a long title. Robb has spent more than 2 decades applying his deep understanding of user-centric design to unlocking hyper-automation. In his forthcoming book, Age of Invisible Machines, a practical guide to creating a hyper-automated ecosystem of intelligent digital workers, is a must-read. It provides an easy-to-understand look at what's really happening with AI. Unlike many books about technical topics, Age of Invisible Machines is, as its title implies, a practical guide to bring AI into the workplace. Am I recommending you read this book? And yes, I did get a review copy of it in advance. Yes, I am. It's a must-read for anyone looking to determine how AI, and specifically hyper-automation, is the next big thing to staying competitive. Today, Robb discusses 5 ways that AI is programming us and how to stop it. 3 questions to ask when charting a course towards hyper-automation in your organization, common myths about conversational AI, and a lot more. If you want to get an insider's view on practical ways to use AI, then this podcast is for you. We've got a lot to unpack, so let's get started. Robb, I'm really so happy that you're able to come onto the show because AI is an increasingly controversial topic. It seems the general view has gone from fascination to, in some respects, alienation. We all like the idea that AI could do so many things for us, and then at the same time, there's all these rumors that it's controlling our lives and that it's going to, world domination, so to speak, take over everything. Yeah, can you tell us more about that?
This is a tough one, right?
Okay.
Because no one can tell the future.
Right.
So, and I think a lot of people try to, and they, whether it's dim or positive, and when it comes to AI, and, we're all predicting what we're going to invent next. And as we know, not too many of us are very good at that. So, but I will say that, like anything, if we're afraid of smart machines, which AI is just a buzzword, right? We're just talking about smarter machines than we've built in the past. If you're going to try to manage it, you got to understand it.
Right.
I mean, that is always the beginning of any problem is, what are we talking about? The boogeyman, or are we talking about something real here? And so what we're just talking about is, should we be more afraid of smarter machines? And should we be more scared of smarter machines? And I think the answer is, yeah. But we should be really scared of dumb machines. The atomic bomb is a machine. The missile that it rides in is a machine. And the launch pad is a machine. And the button you push is a machine. But I'm more scared of Putin and the brain and the human than I am of the machine. And it might just be true that it's the machine that saves us, right? Thank God there's a machine between him and that device. And now you ask, do you wish it was smarter or dumber? Do you just want a button that just works, or should it do checks and balances? And so I think, like anything, my brother always likes to tell this story when he visited Ghana, that it was a beach town right on the ocean, and all of the parents would teach their kids to be afraid of the ocean. Like, don't go near the ocean is dangerous. Don't go near the ocean, period. but that's how they ate and survived.
Right.
Was the ocean, right?
Right.
So it was this thing where they didn't want the ocean to go anywhere. They didn't not value the ocean. But it's dangerous. And so I think from the moment that man sharpened a stick, machines became a threat, and we've always had to understand them and try to manage within them. And I think I just have hope for smarter machines being easier to manage than harder.
I think that's an interesting point of view. It's not one that I have heard put forward too often. I think people look at AI as getting so advanced that it has a mind of its own, that it's not a person controlling a smarter machine, that, like you said, instead of just pushing one button, it actually has checks and balances, but that the machine itself becomes can't find the right word for it at the moment, but it acts on its own. Is that myth or is that reality?
The idea that we would program self-preservation into a machine certainly is plausible. I think it really comes down to will machines be more dangerous than they are now, right? Not will they be dangerous? And I think that's the tough part of the problem. Like, nobody can deny that machines are dangerous and will continue to be dangerous. It's just, will they be more dangerous or less dangerous? And that's the part where I really don't think anybody knows. I think there's a lot of people who are making assumptions that they could get worse. But I'm just looking at where we are today and how scared we should be of the current machines we have, given the world situation. And I'm like, how much worse could it get?
Right. Well, I mean, I hate to be the naysayer, but it does seem that there may be a ceiling on better, but worse tends to be a bottomless pit that extends clear to infinity. They seem always to come up with worse.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of the moment you say what I just said.
Yeah, something comes up that you're like, oh my God, I didn't think it would go there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's some of the concerns around AI, but like you're pointing out, some of that is more sci-fi than what might realistically happen.
Right. And yeah, it really does come down to responsible deployment of machines. And are we capable of doing that? And the answer is, well, history says no.
Right.
And are we going to get better or worse at it? I don't know. That's a tough one. I guess the point I'm trying to make is you can't put machines back, we can't roll the clock back to before we invented the atomic bomb. We can't get rid of the machines we have. It's possible that the way out of the dangers of the current machines we have is through smarter machines. It's possible. Right.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting hypothesis. Now, bringing AI back into what you might call day-to-day life, as most of us know it, how can companies leverage hyper automation to stay ahead of the competition? And maybe start out by just explaining to us what exactly is hyper automation. You bring that up in your book.
Yeah, the easiest way to explain it is like when your kids come home from grandma and grandpa's house and they're wired on candy and they're running around the house, tearing everything down. And then you say, okay, now imagine that you could replicate them instantly to infinity and actually get them to do productive things like clean the room and do the laundry instead of tear down the house.
Dare to dream, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now we're in a place where we're just talking about hyper automation. It's automation done really fast. And it might even, you might even go as far as to say it might be automation creating itself. So it's where automation is automating itself and finding ways to automate by watching what we're doing and making suggestions. And of course, back to in a controlled way, in a moderated way, but responsible way. But hyper automation is just automating fast. And I think when you think about it, you kind of look at every company has this ratio of human tasks to automated tasks.
Right.
And we all think that ratio is going to be static and that the more we automate, the fewer human tasks will be required in the company. But history is showing us that the more we automate, the more human tasks we invent. And that ratio doesn't seem to be closing the gap. It seems like we keep finding jobs and creating new jobs for humans to do as we automate the old ones. So that ratio is the thing to watch. Don't assume it's going to be, it hasn't been. The cappuccino machine in your house was the beginning of baristas in Starbucks, not the end of it.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think hyperautomation is the act of closing that gap quicker than everybody else in a kind of rapid way that gives you a competitive advantage.
It's interesting that you said that the more we automate, the more other jobs we create. Do you think that's sort of like, nature abhors a vacuum, or is it something else? We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, our purpose is to have purpose.
Right. Well said.
So we're going to make and create purpose. We're very, very good at inventing jobs. Most of the jobs we do aren't necessary. It's this idea that productivity is a measure of our human worth. And I think the future is a rethinking of how we measure ourselves. And is productivity really our number one metric for how we should measure? Is that on our deathbed? Is that what people say? I wish I was more productive in my life.
Yeah, it's a good point. And you're right. I mean, you and me and so many other people were raised with that ideology about productivity, that it's just an essential to, like you said, measuring. I don't want to say your human worth, but pretty close to it. Right.
Yeah. And I think that it's a healthy idea to start saying maybe it's connection. Maybe right. It's not, and what is connection? Maybe connection is creativity and art, and like this conversation not being pre-written,
right.
Is what makes it fun and interesting. And if we were just saying the same words every day, that gets boring. And so maybe connection is art. I know that's kind of going out there, but what if it is creativity and art? And then we sort of measure ourselves by our creative lives, not our productive lives.
I think that's a really good point, and something that more people are going to start to consider. I think that in general, in a very broad-based way, you can sort of sense that people are starting to question, right, whether more is really more satisfying, valuable, etc. Across many different areas of our lives, whether it be the acquisition of different things, right? Whether it be acquisitions of money in general, of more goods, right. Of more experiences, or whether, like you're saying, it's something deeper and more thoughtful.
Yeah, I think about that every time I complain about younger generations.
Right.
I stop myself and say, maybe they get it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, sometimes you do have to turn it on its head and say, what if the other guy is actually right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, carrying on from what you're saying here, a lot of companies are trying to replace human beings with bots or with some version of automation, right? And a lot of work or a lot of conversation has come out around actually having artificial intelligence that can carry on a conversation with you. From your experience, you talk about there's situations where conversational AI actually can provide better experiences than a human being. Can you share what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, and it really, like, to sort of begin that, you kind of realize that automation has no purpose unless it improves the experience of our lives.
Right.
Not matches it. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with how automation is deployed today, is that they deploy it to save money.
Right.
But not to improve the customer's experience or the employee's experience. And if you deploy it to save money, but it doesn't improve the experience, you've really stepped backwards.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big challenges out there, is we understand that for cars to drive themselves, they're going to have to drive better than humans. Not as well, not worse, right? We're going to expect that our automation does a better job. And then the other side of that, the less sort of, the more sort of positive side, the opportunity side, is to realize, like, automating what you do. What about automating what you should be doing?
Right.
A lot of people look at what they're doing and think that could be automated. And instead of saying, okay, that's what you're doing, what should you be doing?
Right.
Should we automate that? And does that elevate your organization from automating what you do to taking that next leap to doing better and thinking about automating how you should be doing things, how you should be interacting with customers? So I think that's a big opportunity.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that same point has been brought up around digitization, which is, don't just take what you're doing and digitize it, take the opportunity to rethink what you're doing to begin with, right?
100%.
Yeah. But
it's hard though.
It is. Yeah. That's the hard thing. I think the harder part is not the adding AI to it or digitizing it. It's rethinking the actual process itself and challenging yourself, as you're pointing out. Is this the best way we could do it?
Right. And every design like this is kind of common, this process of skeuomorphism. And it's this, it happened in graphic UI design, where all of a sudden, if we had a calculator that was on an iPhone, we would add these drop shadows and we'd make it look like a real calculator. The buttons, we'd actually try to make them look like they were physical buttons because we wanted to, connect people to what it was. But none of that was necessary. It was just to create a familiarity with the device. And then over time, people were like, why are we doing this? This is a lot of extra work. It's not efficient. So they go to flat design, and we see like moving away from skeuomorphism to just more practical ways to interact with machines. And I think conversation is the same thing. We're beginning by saying, oh, machines will talk like other humans will talk to us, instead of, wait, no, they're not other humans. Right. They're machines. We're going to create a new language to talk to machines. We don't need that. So I think that we're still in that skeuomorphic phase of conversations with machines that we're going to evolve out of and say, okay, there's no reason to create a machine.
Yeah.
We don't need all of that. Hello, how are you today?
That's such a good point. And until you brought it up, I actually hadn't even thought about it. So I think these are really good points, because there are things that they may seem obvious to someone who works in the field, but to somebody who doesn't, you don't really think about it until someone like yourself puts this concept forward. And then it does seem very obvious.
Yeah, we call those the obvious but not so obvious ideas. It's the ideas that once you hear them, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But it isn't until you hear it that you can act. And it's funny, that was like, we actually measured that in the book. We highlighted every idea and we user tested it with saying, this is what people love, is these obvious. So we made sure we had enough of them to write a book with them. It's
I think that's great. I think it makes it a lot more meaningful to people as well, because you're taking the theory, the hypothesis, and so forth, and you're bringing it forward in things that people can actually say, oh yeah, actually, I can see how that works. Makes it much more real and much more applicable, right? So.
Right. And let's trust me. You're sort of like, oh, this makes sense. I'm trusting my own judgment.
Yeah, I think that's fundamental. I think that one of the hardest things is to get people to accept something new, is to get to, like you're saying, that point of where they actually feel that they've come to that conclusion, right? And that their good judgment is telling them that this is true, as opposed to just having to have faith in what someone else is saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think I was there a while ago and I realized, people don't.
It's one of the hardest things about anything that's new, to get people to embrace it on a widespread scale.
Absolutely.
Now, when we talk about AI, what do you see as some of the common myths? I mean, I think that it's taken on a life of its own, a persona of its own, so to speak. And a lot of that might be media hype around it, and because it is new and because it can do a lot of extraordinary things. But as someone who really has your hands in the clay, what do you think that people are looking at AI that it could do, either positively or negatively, and that you're thinking, well, actually, no?
Yeah, so I'd say the first myth that I see is that it is kind of what we talked about, touching on that earlier, is that we should interact with machines in the way we interact with each other. I think that's the first myth. Machines are capable of creating buttons and drop downs and maps and all kinds of things instantly. To improve the communication, to speed up the communication. It can finish our sentences for us, it can anticipate what we do. So a lot of people misunderstand that the pinnacle of AI is that it can understand what you say and understand what you mean by what you're saying. But actually, it's higher than that. The pinnacle of AI is anticipating what you're going to say and what you want before you want it. And that's the ideal state. That's where you get that delightful moment that and not the autocorrect that's your best friend that finishes your sentences wrong, but the one that actually anticipates correctly. That's the best use of AI, right? Is where it's actually anticipating why you're calling, or before you call that you're going to need something. So I think that's the first thing, is it's not a person, and let's create a new language. It's not going to be just words. It's not going to be language based. It can hold a lot of context. It's very good at keeping past conversations top of mind and factoring that in a really fast way. So I think that's probably the first one. The second one is that a lot of people think that designing conversations is easy because they do it every day, because they have conversations. But if you talk to Jerry Seinfeld, who designs his set, and you realize that it's easier to design a comedy set because it's not two-way. You don't have to anticipate what the audience might say and then how you might react to it, right? So a lot goes into a set. A lot goes into designing conversations. TED Talks are very well rehearsed. So I think a lot of people run into this and they don't take that time up front to design and value that the design of that conversation is really, really important. And then the other thing I see that's the mistake that companies make is they start automating with their customers. They start with customer interactions first, which makes no sense because they're your most important resource. So we try to convince companies, start with a more friendly audience. Start automating and using AI in conversations with your employees who are going to be forgiving and on board with you. And once you get your toe in the water and figure that out, and you feel comfortable that you've got that, then move to your customers.
Such a good point, because you're right. People always think about this stuff in trying to get rid of that onerous help desk situation, which costs companies, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And it's such a frustration that typically that's where they put that AI, and it doesn't work out maybe as well as they had planned initially. So it's interesting. I would have never thought to actually use it internally.
Yeah. It's amazing how well it can work, and you figure that it's also usually the place that companies do the worst at communicating, to their employees. So the bar is really low. It's a great place to kind of start.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. That's really a great test opportunity to do that. And I think that people do look at AI, maybe because if you don't work with it every day, you're sort of being sold what people who are maybe selling you that service want you to, what they think you want to hear, as opposed to
a lot of BS.
As opposed to what may actually be best practices.
Yeah, there's a lot of we call them party tricks. A lot of demos are just party tricks, on AI that are very well staged and seem amazing. And then when a company tries to implement them, find out that it's either too complicated or or the tech's
Right.
not there yet.
So
Yeah.
talking about the tech is not there yet, where is the tech right now? I mean, in reality, and I know that maybe this is a very, very broad question, but what should we be looking to utilize this for based on where the technology is at this point?
Yeah, so the tech's pretty advanced. You can do a lot more than I think most people think. I think when we show people what you can do, they're usually blown away and they're like, I thought we were a lot further than we are. But with that said, where I think the focus is on feasibility, just because you can doesn't mean you can. And companies, it's so complicated and hard to implement that you can't. Most companies can't. And so feasibility and the ease in which you can implement complex interactions and AI solutions is really where people should focus. Instead of pulling out the feature list and checking all the boxes, can you do this? Can you do this? It's more like, can I do this? Can I do this? Show me how I can do this. And is it feasible? And I even think that's really tough. I find that most companies are pretending that they can evaluate this stuff, but they can't. They can't tell the difference between one solution and another. So I have this simple rule that says, especially in the world of conversational AI, is if that company can show you that they use it all over their company, then it's feasible. If they don't use it, if they give you the, cobbler's kids have no shoes story, don't buy it. The bottom line is, if it's not feasible enough for them to use it, it's not going to be feasible enough for you to use it.
Such a good point. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, even with something that's less complex from AI, anytime people are trying to evaluate a tech solution, if that isn't an industry that you work in, if you're not an actual developer, I think people find it very difficult to actually analyze what they need, whether any particular technology is the right one for them. We all sort of fall victim, right? Shiny objects syndrome, the fact that tech companies tend to have to square being a feature creature, because features are a good marketing ploy, with taking what you have and actually making sure they consistently work, and doing that sort of unglamorous back end constant improvement debugging. As a user, it's hard to sort all that out. Yeah,
and I have friends that work at Amazon and Google and IBM, and you ask them, so how often as an employee does the average employee interact with a bot? And they're like, almost never. You're like, okay. So they're not using it. But they want you to use it.
Exactly right. Wow, that's so well said, because you see that all the time. The myth just takes on a life of its own. It becomes legend.
Yes.
So if you're looking at AI, where we stand right now, it's very hard, as you said earlier, and very correctly so, that it's very difficult to predict the future. But what direction do you see it going in? What do you see are the next things coming that are actually going to be applicable to a wider spread group of companies or users?
I think that the thing that's easy to underestimate is that, this journey, and I'll promise to keep this shorter than it's going to sound.
No, go ahead.
But this started for me when I had a prior company that focused on design and development, one of the first UX firms. And we were hired by Boeing to help with the design of the cockpit of the 787, the Dreamliner. And, I'm going to oversimplify, but the problem was, hey guys, we got this new airplane and it's far more complicated than the 747, the old airplane. And it's got bigger windows because we have this, carbon fiber body. So basically, we don't have enough wall space for all the buttons that we need to put in this thing in the cockpit. So what are we going to do here, right? And if you just Googled the 747 dashboard and the 787, you would see that the 787 is just a series of 6 really important screens. And our piece was working with Jeppesen on the flight planning. So think of the flight planning as the context, right? It was a big piece of what to put on the screen when. Are we taking off? Are we landing? What we're able to do now is narrow the number of choices that a pilot has in front of them in terms of what they need to do next, right? Really contextualizing the choices and things like that. The bottom line is that I'd never flown an airplane in my life, but I sat in the simulator and I was able to take off and land a 787 with 10 minutes of training. Yeah. And you like press this button. Okay, we're taking off. Time to land, press this
incredible.
Button, right? Now granted, could I handle all of the exceptions? Right. No.
Yes.
But that's amazing, right? So I'm sitting there going, wow, like what just happened, right? What if all software and all machines became that easy to operate? If you can do that to a 787, all of our software could be a lot easier to use than it is. And you go, well, we've spent all this time consolidating all our back ends. What about the front ends? What would happen if we had one consolidated front end for all of our software? And you realize traditional UIs will never scale. Like that's 1,000 tabs designed by 1,000 people. There's no way that would be usable. But with conversation applications, the more things it can do, the better. And the fewer things, the worse it is. So when we ask our conversational application to do something and it says, I can't, that's actually worse. We want it to do more and more and more. The more it can do, the better the experience. When our apps get overburdened with buttons, it becomes a worse experience. So this idea of one interface for all software just makes it accessible to the world. It makes it accessible to people that aren't computer literate. It's just this world-changing moment, and I'm super passionate, obviously, about that idea of connecting and catching people up with technology. This whole technology is leaving people behind isn't about teaching people how to code. It's about teaching machines to go to the people and talk their language.
That's such an interesting point of view. And I can definitely see what you mean by consolidating things on the user interface side of things. Because if you look at it in the early days, you needed all those C prompts and so forth. And then in a sense, and I'm probably glossing over a lot of different things, Apple came out with that graphic interface that made things a little bit easier. And now you're saying to consolidate a lot of these steps. So I suppose a lot of those steps would be happening behind the scenes thanks to AI.
Yep. Yeah, it's not that 747 dashboard that pops up that we call Photoshop. It's just, hey, I want to crop this image, and a little thing comes up with a slider, and we do it.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you frame it that way, because we don't look at it typically, if we're not inside the industry like you are, from that perspective. But you're right. As you're describing this to me, I can definitely see the validity in what you're putting forward, and why that really is the solution, and will help more people be able to utilize this technology, because otherwise the learning curve is just, it's too extensive for people who are using this as an auxiliary to doing another kind of a job.
Yeah. And that when we set out to write the book, it wasn't because I wanted to write a book. I was very busy, and I'd done it once before. I was there, there was no allure. I was not excited about it, but I just realized we had a lot of important things to share. And what really drove me was that I'd read so many books that were so high level, and they talked about AI and the future and how it's going to change everything. But it didn't get down to the nuts and bolts of how you would implement it today. How would an average company or person sit down? Where do they start? What do they do next? The paint by numbers version of how to implement this in a responsible way and in a practical way. So in a sense, we wanted to write a book to make AI feasible, so it really does get into the details. It's not just this high level, the world's going to change.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because you're right. A lot of things are written and they're just too theoretical for anybody outside of the industry to really be able to understand it and see the value, a practical value in what's being done. So I think it's wonderful that you've written the book. Where can people find the book, Robb? I know a lot of people will want to get their hands on it.
Yeah, it's published by Wiley, so you
Okay.
can get it through them. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all the usual places. You just have to, search Age of Invisible Machines. And the invisible machines part, is the idea that when machines talk,
Right.
they disappear, right? So, yeah, Age of Invisible
I'm going to
Machines.
put that in the show notes. And how can people connect with you? I think a lot of people would probably want to reach out to you as well as reading the book.
Yeah. So there's a website, ageofinvisible.machines.com, and then on LinkedIn under Robb Wilson, and you can always connect with me, and I'm always sharing stuff, and as well as the blog on the
That's
website. We also have a QR code in the book. Every chapter kind of connects to a bot, of course, right? So you can ask questions and talk, and we created a kind of digital twin of myself, so you can ask questions to me that's kind of baked into AI about the book.
I mean, that alone has got to be a must experience. Well, Robb, thank you so much for joining us on A Seat at the Table. You've shared so many interesting things. I mean, this has just been an education in a box for me. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fantastic. I really appreciate the opportunity to share ideas.
Thank you for joining me here on A Seat at the Table. If you've enjoyed this episode or learned something from it, I'd love to hear about it. If you'd like to support the show, please hit the subscribe button. And if you can take a minute to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or other channels, that would be fabulous. And check out our podcast website, seatpodcast.com. That's SEAT podcast.com. And while you're there, take a look at Your Seat at the Table, a new podcast course that will show you step by step exactly what you need to do to land those prestigious guest spots on podcasts. Being a guest on a podcast is a great way to gain visibility and grow your authority. Your Seat at the Table gives you a detailed roadmap with templates to teach you exactly how to achieve this. So head on over to seatpodcast.com. And if there's something you'd like to share, ideas, suggestions, or comments, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining me today and being part of our international community. I'm Jane Singer, and I'll see you in the next podcast episode.